Okay. I guess that's gonna be everyone. I'll go ahead and get started. So, hi everyone, this is Death Mammal, and today I'll be talking about stopping at the breaking point. Basically, this is going to cover the different stages of a relapse and how we can stop ourselves as we go through these motions. I'll be breaking it down in a couple of different angles to try and give you the best insight that I can from my own experience. Pretty much all of this presentation is anecdotal, covering from before we get to that point to the actual relapse and different things that we can do to prevent ourselves from, along the way. So, how to quit at the first sign of a potential break. How do we actually quit at the first sign? My method has always been and will always be by determination, but I think we can be strategic about it. You can consider where you're at, where your headspace is at that moment, how you're feeling, if you're tired, exhausted, bored, or if you're feeling kind of energized or awake. And what are your urges like at that moment? Could you put it on a scale from 1 to 10? I feel like personally being aware of yourself and what you're going through is going to play a key role in being able to stop, especially at that moment of an urge. Another key factor in quitting before the break is our general opinions. How we feel about NoFap and how we see ourselves in that concept is going to have a lot of weight in our recovery. What we genuinely think about NoFap reflects how we're going to recover. If we're generally thinking it's not that important or we're not sure if it's something we need, it's going to have an impact in the process towards recovery. Maybe we'll have shorter streaks or we won't be very engaged, having kind of a 1 foot in and 1 foot out attitude. But also, how you think of yourself impacts your success, how capable you think you are at achieving these goals, and how strongly you feel connected both towards your addiction and your recovery is going to have an impact on how successfully you will overcome this both in the long term and the short term. So, timeline of a relapse. In these next couple of slides, I've broken down the process of going through an urge and a relapse into 3 phases, and that is thought, planning, and then action. Thoughts. Thoughts are the dictator for basically everything that we do. Oh my God, basically everything that we do. They can determine where we're headed in our life. They represent the opinions and principles that we ascribe to, and they also have an impact on how we see ourselves and others. We are going through thoughts all the time. There was a study done at the Queen's University where psychologists showed that the average person has about over 6,000 thoughts a day. It might seem incomprehensible until we start paying attention to our own minds on a regular basis. In fact, by this estimate, you've already gone through about 4 thoughts within just this past minute, and I'm sure you might feel like you've gone through more than that already. Our thoughts go through themes. Another thing to notice is that our thoughts go through themes, and if you pay attention, our thoughts tend to go through the different themes based on our environment, our general attitude, and our expectations. Our environment has an impact on our own thoughts all the time, whether at work, in the kitchen, or a family's house. It sets the stage for how we're going to feel, what we're thinking about, and our general focus, such as a coworker that we hate. The general attitude is impacted by some of the thoughts that we've had prior to this moment. If we're feeling heavy or stressed about a current situation or have been thinking about things that we're looking forward to, our past thoughts impact our present thoughts, which leads to expectations. You know how you think about the day, what you believe you're going to do for the day, and if you have a lot going on or next to nothing. Our expectations set the stage for our mood. How our own thoughts sabotage progress. We need to understand how thoughts undermine our progress, and there's no one that stands in the way of our success or pave the way for our failure more than us. We are the masters of our future, more often than we'd like to admit. Much of our success can be gauged on how we really feel about ourselves, such as the belief of our inadequacy, that we're seeing ourselves as lazy, creating an acceptance of failure, leading us to believe that we simply are not capable, or external opinions about whatever goal we're trying to achieve. That can impact as well, such as, doubting the full benefits of something that we're wanting to do, like working out, but then feeling like it's not that important anymore. Governed by the different sides of ourselves, or our brain, we come to consider ideas that don't truly serve us. And that can break out into many different areas, such as choosing to put things off, creating perspectives that hinder our progress, such as negative self-talk, handling situations poorly, whether it's time management, interactions with other people, or general stress. We can also take part in activities that do not benefit us, and we end up making decisions that have negative repercussions. And obviously, that's what we're going to be talking about most. So we go from thoughts to planning. We begin to engage on ideas of how this will play out. We go from an imagined action to actually picturing making that decision. In the case of NoFap, we begin to visualize the relapse itself, and then thinking about ways we can make that decision happen, while trying to comfort ourselves along the way. By minimizing guilt, we know, what we'll anticipate. We scheme against ourselves, what we're going to do at this moment, and we become intentionally involved in something we know we shouldn't do. We begin a thought of self-sabotage. Throughout this entire process, we are ignoring the main problem, that those thoughts are based on urges, not our normal, rational thinking self. We're listening to the very thoughts we knew to ignore because we've become overwhelmed with urges in spite of our best intentions. We sit there uncomfortable with the cycle of thoughts, usually trying to ignore it or hoping that it goes away. For the most of us, this process doesn't go through just once in our heads. We start to experience an inner dialogue supporting a relapse, visualizing that action, and creating mental workarounds in order to go ahead and break. We make this opportunity actionable in our minds and slowly develop a decision to break rather than just imagining it, which only brings us closer to more inner dialogue and visualization until we finally get to that breaking point. How we break. We go through cycles of being overwhelmed by physical sensations, and that thought process to validate our urge, conceptualize what we'll do next, and then take it into action. This is the general pattern we experience before we are met with intense remorse and promises to ourselves or others that we hope to keep. And then finally, we find ourselves in action. But how do we keep us from landing there? What brings us back to that point every time? From here, I want to talk about urges and habits. Habits, by definition, are a regular tendency or practice that often at times we have a hard time giving up. When it comes to breaking down any addiction, we'll come across the simple term: Urges in this case are the pinnacle moment of an addictive habit. Whether it's a video game, porn, or drug use, the hunger for dopamine can get the best of us, and we become fixated on thoughts of those activities that offer instant gratification. You'll find yourself thinking about that addictive habit during your daily life, even if you mean to quit. There's a wide range of things that can be considered habits. In fact, if something is done enough times, different parts of our brain begin to pick up on those activities. Whether it's locking the car door or how we communicate with a specific person or communicate in general, there are behaviors that we start to adopt. Sometimes it's getting used to a health plan that we've created for ourselves, or mindless activities and behaviors which can lead us, to getting on an app that we didn't mean to, or finding ourselves on our phone in bed even though we told ourselves we weren't going to. So what makes the compulsion so addictive? Frequently, it's an activity that requires low input but offers us high output. The problem? Other drives are more difficult to develop into a habit because their output is typically more gradual. The most rewarding activities require a lot of effort, and their output doesn't seem to have the same kind of peak in gains, even if they are exceedingly more rewarding long term. So what can we do? How do we stop this habit? There are many moments where we can stop ourselves. The challenge is to find aspects of this that are easy to stop and take an initiative to make that change. The decision to stop, though, rests solely on our shoulders. I'm going to share this quote from Jocko Willink. Once people stop making excuses, stop blaming others, and take ownership of everything in their lives, they are compelled to take action to solve their problems. In essence, we are the ones that have to make that change. Luckily, there's a lot of different places and areas where we can stop ourselves. I've broken it down into 4 different categories. Before it occurs, at the first sign, what we're thinking about, when we're acting, and then stopping while you've started. Before it happens, we can make preemptive plans to prevent relapses. This is going to be unique to each person. What works for you might not work for someone else, especially since everyone has different triggers. We can also stop at the first sign of an urge when our mind starts to wander and we start thinking about the addictive habit. That's an opportunity to key in on ourselves and how we're feeling. It's never a bad idea to go ahead and tell yourself that I might feel this urge, but I'm not going to act on it. We can also disengage when we start to imagine taking action. To me, this is the most pivotal moment in any phase of recovery, no matter the addiction. And although the goal is to never break, we are still afforded the final opportunity to stop even if we've already started. Recovery is a long-term commitment to self-improvement. It's not going to be easy. And getting away from the situation, no matter how far we've fallen, counts. So in this slide, I'm going to talk about before. I do want to mention I didn't know the animation was going to be like this when I said I wanted this animation. So there are several things that we can do preemptively to help reduce the frequency that we'll encounter an urge. From the standard measures like bringing in new activities related to recovery into your life that are extremely beneficial, which I'll get to in a second, to self-improvement. Many people include self-improvement activities in their recovery, such as fitness or adopting new hobbies, and find great success doing recovery in tandem with improvement. Another thing you can do is get more active in a community. More often than not, people will suggest getting active with a community relative to recovery, similar to what AA has been practicing for the past 86 years. But simply being engaged in an outreach, even a local community, makes a difference. So, what are those standard measures? Some of those common things that are suggested is uninstalling apps that cause a problem or are getting in the way of your recovery, getting connected with different resources such as PDFs and YouTube videos, and spending your time getting involved with that information, or having someone to talk to. One of the things that I highly suggest is having someone to communicate with. Accountability is best when you have someone you can confide in, especially before you feel like you're going to break. So once an urge starts, our minds begin to shift. Most of the time, this can be survived just by being aware that it's happening and taking solace knowing that it will pass. But it never hurts to get up and change pace with whatever it is that you're doing, just to stop yourself, especially if you know that you're already likely to break. If you're considering relapsing, in my opinion, that's the time to act. If we get to that point where you start thinking about it as opposed to what we'd like to relapse to, in my opinion, that's the cue to start shifting gears. So why is this the most important stage? In my opinion, this is most important during an urge because no matter what, if we have a solid barrier that prevents us from breaking, no matter how far down we might go, we can truly avoid a relapse. For me, I have roughly 4 different barriers at this point, but I'll go ahead and break it down. The first course of action for me is to tell my partner that I am experiencing urge. Over time, this has gotten increasingly easier and actually kind of pleasant because I'm involving the one person who should know that side of me the most, what I'm going through. If I'm still having a hard time after that point, I'll reach out to an accountability buddy. If you don't have one, just talking to someone who is in the same boat as you helps. You'll have the listening ear and emotional boost that you need to weather the storm. If I'm still having a bad time, I just get away from the situation. Getting up and getting away from my desk, preoccupying myself with a chore or an interest is the most important last defense that I need. Cold showers really do work well, and I advise it if you have the opportunity. And last but not least, I give myself permission to hang around this state of mind, clawing my way through an urge as long as I need. There have been moments where it lasts hours, and I've just had to be diligent and accept that I'm going to have to put time into this to avoid the urge. But if you still start to take action and you relapse, you can still stop. Quitting in the middle of a relapse is always better than continuing through it. Put it down and change the subject, mentally. Yes, you might still feel bad because you broke, but you can see the glass half full for having stopped yourself, and that still counts. How you tackle this is up to you. Like I've said before, this is not a one-size-fits-all process. We all have different aspects to our addiction, different things that can trigger us, whether it's moments before bed or the thoughts we play with during the day, which, by the way, is highly inadvisable. We are the masters of our future, and it's up to us to determine, what our boundaries are, what we want to do, and make a plan that works for us. Thank you.